Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode number 105, and today I'm going to be reviewing singles from a label that I've been familiar with, been keeping an eye on for probably the past 15 years or so. Today's episode is going to center around Mule Musiq. Mule is a label that's run by Toshiya Kawasaki. Toshiya is involved in a lot of the projects on Mule, and I think he's actually a DJ more than he is a producer. If you notice, if you go and look at him on Discogs, you'll see that he's listed on a lot of compilations. I think he's primarily a selector and not so much a producer. If I got that wrong, no disrespect intended there, but it seems to me like he's involved in like, hey, let's put together this concept. What tracks are we gonna choose? That's where Toshiya is coming into play, I think, for Mule. He's probably also helping to QA and decide which tracks actually come onto the label. And I feel like he's done a great job with that. If you look at Mule from a holistic standpoint, they started back in 2005 and they're still releasing very actively now. I mean, even if you don't like a particular release, I think if you're honest and objective about it, you could say that pretty much every track on the label is a 3 out of 5 or better, right? And then it's just a matter of, is the track really special, or does it, sort of align with your taste and your interests? But to me, almost every Mule record is at least worth sampling and checking out, and I think that says a lot considering that they've got a couple hundred releases between the Mule Musiq label, then Mule Electronic, which has a ton of great stuff, and Endless Flight, which is a little bit more down-tempo and disco leaning. It's just got a lot going on. And the other thing that I think is really interesting about Mule is that their sound is pretty hard to pin down. If I had to use one genre to describe it, I would say house or maybe deep house. And when I say deep house, I mean true old school deep house, not like modern deep house where the term's just kind of being thrown about, almost like nonsensically at this point. There's also some dub techno in there, believe it or not. Like you'll see Ecologist, aka Brendan Muller, making an appearance in there. And there's even some techno. There's also some disco influence, and I'm going to cover some of that as I go through my releases for today. So today I'm going to go through 5 of my favorite singles from the label, and I hope you guys enjoy these. Like I said, it's a massive catalog, and my idea with these episodes is to just give you a guide and maybe point out some stuff that you overlooked and help you sort out a label that would otherwise take hours to sit down and sift through. My first choice for you today is from a classic track that Kuniyuki made in 2007. It's a vocal called All These Things. And I'll admit, I don't own the original All These Things, even though it is on vinyl. Some of Kuniyuki's tracks are a little bit too organic and deep and kind of worldly for me, but I love the remixes. There's 2 really good remixes that came out of All These Things. The one over my shoulder is Clausel's remix, and the reason that I'm not reviewing that in this episode is because I already talked about Clausel's remix in my Joe Clausel episode. And if you hang on till the end of this episode, I'll put one of those little squares up in the corner of the screen so you can click on it and check that episode out. All These Things got a super deluxe ambient like piano makeover from Joe Clausel there, and it's one of my favorite records in my collection. Unfortunately, it's very limited, and I saw the prices on Discogs are getting really stupid for that one, and it's almost to the point of kind of being ugly. Like maybe a repress would be in order for that. But my second favorite version of All These Things is the Theo Parrish, and you're not going to hear me talk too much about Theo Parrish on this channel. I have probably 4 or 5 of his records, and this one is probably in my top 2 or 3. It's the All These Things remix, like I said, and Theo kind of has his slowed down, like kind of plotty 118, 119 kind of woozy wazzy kind of beats going on in his tracks. And the thing that I love the most about this remix here, besides the kind of like the muffled synth and the vocal that are brought over from the original track. I just love the little jazz, the little cymbal rhythm that just goes on in the background. It's just a classic jazz kind of like almost like percussion, and it has such a classy old school throwback to it. You can almost picture like a smoky lounge and a jazz band performing this. On this channel, I don't think I've ever talked about Italo House or Italo Disco. It's obviously Italo Disco is made by Italian producers, and it basically, the few records in my collection that do have an Italian influence, they are very happy and synthy. I love synth pop. It's one of the reasons that I love 80s music, so it kind of makes sense that I would like Italo Disco influenced electronic music. And this one here I think is a sleeper on Mule, and this producer is Marcello Giordani. Obviously with a pretty Italian name there. He released this track called Respect Yourself. I think this came out in maybe 06 or 07. This track sort of came into my world via the Joris Vorn Balance CD, or yeah, double CD, which was Balance number 14. And there's a segment where Respect Yourself is sort of featured, and Respect Yourself has like super bright synths in it. It's got some disco influence in the drums in the background that kind of give it that Italo disco feel that I was trying to describe a few minutes ago. And the synths, if you listen to this on a sunny day, I would say like in the car, and with the windows down, maybe like early spring, I feel like this can really just hit you and kind of pluck at your heartstrings. It's just such an uplifting and unashamedly happy track. Like you just almost get giddy listening to it, and that's why I adore this record. Next up is Kuniyuki again. Now, I said before that he can go a little bit soft and drummy and a little bit too, I guess organic would be the word for it, sometimes. But I also have a lot of Kuniyuki records, so I like when he gets a little bit darker and a little bit more aggressive. Now, here's his track Shout, which I think would be really nasty at maybe like a Burning Man type of event where you're going from afternoon into evening and possibly into dusk. That's when I would play the track Shout here. Shout is just a really eclectic one out of Kuniyuki's catalog. It's just got these kind of windy, buzzy synths in it that constantly appear and disappear throughout the record. If you look at the vinyl itself under a light, you can see stripes every inch or so as this, as you know, you move in towards the inside of the vinyl. And what those stripes are is Kuniyuki creating these wild, like I said, buzzy, like I don't even know how to describe it, because if I was a producer, I wouldn't know how to create that effect. Almost like the Patrice Baumel track called Roar that came out on Get Physical back in like '06, '07. Like that sort of like crazy thing where you just take a sound and just change the speed of the repetition until you create like almost like a new sound from speeding it up. That's what's happening in Shout here. And on top of that, I just absolutely love the micro percussions that sort of just click and tick in the background. The first time that I heard this, I played it at night in my apartment, and I was almost like frightened by it because of how much drama this thing has in it. And here is my fourth pick for this episode. This is Kulo de Song's Ambush. Now, I talked about Kulo de Song a little bit in my Black Coffee episode, and I drew comparisons and similarities between Kulo and Black Coffee. They're both South African natives, and they both make the same type of house. And I really think Kulo's house and also Black Coffee's house stands out because it's almost like they're tribal percussion experts. Black Coffee and Kulo use very snippy, snappy drums. They create a lot of drama in their tracks, and the element that I love the most out of Ambush is the tick-tock. If you listen to the sample here, you'll hear the tick-tock percussions. I guess it's like a wooden talk that's kind of structured in a clever, kind of catchy, rhythmic way. That loop in and of itself, to me, sells the record. Like, I don't need anything else, and I don't need the remix. I actually don't care much for the remix, the Voyage remix on here. Like, it's okay, but the original just was a home run smash. The original also features sort of like because it's called Ambush, right? Which would have like an aggressive, ominous type connotation to it. And the music, I think, fits that. There's a kind of sine wave undertone just kind of carrying in the background. It might have been a woman's voice or a chorus of women singing, and the notes just sort of held in almost like a death or funeral type context. That's the vibe that it creates. And there's also some pretty slick violin strings that come in and sweep very slowly in the background that really bring this whole thing together and just create this like really ominous vibe that I was describing. I feel like the track is restrained and very minimal almost in its approach. It doesn't do anything too crazy. There might be a crescendo in there where all the elements come together, but it's not a dramatic build. I think this would really lend itself to an opening set, and it's one of those stealth tracks that would get people's attention and really just kick a night into gear. In 2019, Mule switched up their art concept. Now, going back to the Kulo record that I was just looking at, most of the early Mule records, not all of them, have this type of simple art, and I like it. I like the way the art looks. It's simple. They always choose like sort of pleasing colors. There's pinks and yellows and oranges and reds, but it's just like a nice looking aesthetic. And while I'm on that topic, I also want to say that you'll never see, in all of the time that I've been looking at Mule records, you'll never see somebody on Discogs complaining about a scratchy pressing or pops and clicks, or oh, mine has like a mispress, or it's got a skip in it. You don't see anybody complaining about sound quality ever for Mule. So I really want to acknowledge the fact that they put out probably 200 or 300 records amongst this label and their sub labels, and their quality is consistent. You just know when you get the record, it's going to be good, and you're not going to have to worry about any BS like they don't know what they're doing. That's completely off the table here. And in 2019, I guess they decided to switch up their art concept, and they went with this more kind of abstract, almost like finger painting type concept, and I really like it. I think it just was like a nice shift in direction. And this is something that, I mean, it's easy to find it on your shelf. If you're just looking at it edge on, you'll be able to spot this thing, and it's nice when you pull it out. I feel like the artwork accompanies the music in all cases, so why not go above and beyond like they did here? Now, this is Chaos in the CBD's track Hydrate. And I love this. I in the last few years, I've been on a 90s resurrection kick, and buying a lot of music that has 90s influence. And this here just absolutely reeks of like something that Danny Howes would play in the beginning of his sets. If you've ever listened to one of Danny's sets where he has multiple hours to work with, he'll very often kick it off with something a little bit bordering on down tempo or breaks. That's really what Danny Howes does best, is like find all these obscure eclectic tracks and kind of put them together into this, really wonderful mix. And you're like, man, that thing's like a piece of art when you just listen to him like mix it all together. I don't know if Danny ever played this track, but he should. This would be a great one to start a set out with. I actually started one of my recorded mixes out with this, and I think it set the tone perfectly. It's beautiful to mix out of. It's got a nice solid break beat, and I just absolutely love the little retro throwback vocal where it just says ecstasy, right? And it's just got such like a mid to late 90s vibe to it. It's such a like a smooth record, and it's something that really, like when I was talking about Mule having an eclectic taste and not really being able to pin down their sound, this is a great example of that. So I had only planned to cover 5 records initially in this, but I'm going to do a bonus pick too, because I feel like this one really needs a nod. This is the Zero Set Reconstruct Part 3 vinyl, and it was by an artist named Mobius, and I was doing a little bit of digging on Discogs, and unfortunately Mobius passed away in 2015, but here he did this, well, not him, but Mule did a reconstruction of or like a remix set for an album that Mobius did in 2007. And for this vinyl in particular, part 3, they had DJ Nobu come in and make some remixes. And DJ Nobu, for people that are into abstract and experimental and techno, he can really put some sneaky records out. Now, some of them are a little bit almost like too weird for me, but every once in a while he really connects and really smashes one, and this one is just absolutely crazy. This is probably the most techno record that I can think of off the top of my head for Mule. And it's an example, a rare example of heavy, hard techno that I like. Like I'm really not a techno person when it comes down to it, especially like really loopy and pure techno. I get really turned off by that. But there's just something about the heaviness and the muddiness of this that I just can't get enough of it. The percussion just sits really nice in the background with a lot of momentum. There's some kind of like a gentle rise and fall created by some of the synths that sit in the background. And the bass, the kick in the bass line almost reminds me of something like Deep Chord or Gas, where it has that muddiness to it. And I feel like with all of that coming together, if you heard this, I mean, this sounds wild on my home speakers in close proximity. If you got this on like a big system where the speakers were really far away and the subs could like really rumble and roll, this would knock people really like flat on their butt. I mean, somebody else commented on Discogs that this is appropriate for a 5 a.m. kind of thing where people are, you know, lost in the mix, like they're lost in the vibe. That's exactly what this is. This is not to be dropped early. This is to be dropped late when you really need to put the exclamation point on your set. All right, that's all for today's picks, guys. I focused specifically on singles today. I might come back and do an albums episode because there's a lot of really good albums too on Mule Musiq. If you guys have any other recommendations for singles that you love, please comment them down below. I hope you enjoyed these picks and take care.